seems to be a lot of negative news coming out of the UK, specifically with regards to Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. But is there really much truth to it? And what if I told you that the truth is the exact opposite? Welcome to 1%BTC. I'm Dominic, and this is David. And today we're looking right at my great hometown of the UK. So as a reminder, nothing that we say here is financial investment, tax, or legal advice. All investing is risky. Investing in Bitcoin and digital assets is particularly risky. We try our best to provide a balanced view, but bear in mind that some of our models and our data can be wrong or outdated. Do your own research. So today we are breaking down the narrative versus the reality for the UK. First story. The UK has been considering a crypto donation ban. Now, this is one that my mother enthusiastically sent me and said, oh, they're thinking about banning Bitcoin. False. The UK government is considering banning cryptocurrency donations to political parties, and this move is seen as targeting Nigel Farage's Reform UK, which recently began accepting Bitcoin and other digital asset donations and has promoted a crypto revolution platform. Now, the narrative. As you could probably tell, this particular article was spread by The Guardian, and The Guardian notoriously is left-leaning, and they have not been the most likable or had the best stance towards Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. Now, the manipulation level, as far as the tool is picked up, is medium to high. It portrays crypto as a vector of attack for foreign interference and misuse. It frames the UK government as cracking down on crypto's influence on politics, presents crypto donations as a national security risk, and implicitly casts Bitcoin as politically sensitive. In terms of those emotions, obviously, when you read something like this, the average person feels suspicion, caution. It promotes the ideas of political tension, and they start to associate Bitcoin with risk. Now, obviously, as you could probably guess from reading something like this, the drivers of this are, it's very heavily targeted, although it's about cryptocurrency, it's very heavily targeted at Farage and the Reform, and it's a very political / dramatic angle. So what are the facts? Well, it's true. The government is considering a ban according to multiple officials, but here's the point. There's no draft legislation that exists. Translation, this is no more than just politicians discussing things in the same way that your nan and granddad will discuss what they're going to do for dinner on a Sunday night. The reality is it's partially validated, but not confirmed, therefore. Reform UK, it's true, were the first political party to formally accept crypto. And Labour's forthcoming election bill is expected to tighten political finance regulations broadly. But once again, it's not a ban. So just to confirm, no formal ban exists yet. The proposal is still in the exploratory and pre-legislative phase. So I'm going to jump straight into the scoring for this one, David. I'm not going to give you a chance to have a guess with this one, because I think hopefully it's pretty obvious. So the narrative is obviously really strong. Yeah, crypto donations pose significant national security risks. That leaves a really bad taste in people's mouths. Yeah, the idea that what could be the new leading party of the UK is receiving foreign donations that are hard to track in crypto or Bitcoin is a really strong negative narrative. The reality is the ban is being discussed, but the evidence points to it being exploratory policy conversations and not active legislation. Therefore, it's moderately negative. It's a credible regulatory risk, but not yet formal or imminent. So therefore, I would have to summarize it as the UK considering a ban on crypto and political donations sounds dramatic, but the actual Bitcoin impact is structural rather than financial. The proposal doesn't restrict buying Bitcoin, holding Bitcoin, banking with Bitcoin, or integrating digital assets into the economy. It only affects how political parties receive donations. That means it doesn't actually suppress user adoption, liquidity flows, ETF demand, or institutional activity. So instead, when you think about it, the real effect is reputational. It signals that UK lawmakers view crypto donations as a potential vector for foreign influence, fraud, or opacity. That framing can create mild negative sentiment, especially for people unfamiliar with Bitcoin's transparency advantages. But let's be honest, in practical terms, this story ranks low because it doesn't stop British citizens or institutions from accessing crypto. simply adds a compliance boundary to political fundraising. And that's if it even reaches the legislative stage. So as far as long-term stories go, I would put this in the FUD category, and I would put it firmly in the ignore for now vote. David, any thoughts, disagreements?
Yeah, you know, when you first kind of presented this story, it made me think of back in early 2022 when Trudeau introduced the ban on donations to, you know, the Canadian Freedom Convoy protest. So they were basically supporting the truckers that were kind of on strike, and it was a way for them to support a movement against the government, right? And they basically went into they blacklisted all these people donating funds to support the truckers, and that's what immediately. So I think that's quite accurate. It's an 8 in terms of a negativity, or a -8, but it's, I mean, putting it through the BRS tool, you clearly see it's not as negative as it's just thinking about it. They're not actually banning it.
That's it. And the important thing that the tool's picked up is like, hey, this is just basically people have discussed it. If you get there's no proof of how many politicians are discussing it. There's no proof of who was discussing it. All we know is that there was some politician that has gone on the record and said, hey, I was discussing this with no other politician. So complete FUD as far as I see it, and shame on the Guardian for publishing this in such a deflammatory way. I think it is pure political theater. Anyway,
hey, before we get into the next story, I just want to remind folks, viewers, to please like and subscribe our videos, because it genuinely helps us to understand what topics you want more of, and it pushes the content so the people that who actually need it get to see it. Thanks for being part of this movement.
Absolutely. And just to add to that, if you've got any news stories that you want us to run through the tool, you want to know how much attention you should be paying to them, post them in the comments. We'll send us links in the comments. We'll do our best to run them through the tools, or at least reply to your comments saying with the scores whether it's worthy or not. So yeah, please do. What's the actual reality of what's going on in the UK? So the very same 10 days that news came out, yeah, the UK's Financial Conduct Authority, the FCA, has invited crypto firms to participate in shaping new investment rules, marking a shift towards integrated co-designed regulation. So the move signals that crypto is now considered a structurally relevant part of the UK financial system, though increased oversight is also implied. So this headline, the narrative would have you believe that crypto is becoming a respected, institutionalized part of the UK financial regulation. Yeah. Now, the good news is that actually the tools picked up that there's not much manipulation in this. The consultations are real. The narrative uplift is mild but genuine. As you can read from this headline compared to the one from The Guardian, it's very neutral in tone. So overall, although there are things in this article and ones like it that the tool has checked that promote emotions of like optimism, confidence, relief, as you'll see when we go through the actual facts, there's a lot of positives to it. So the FCA has invited crypto firms to shape the rules. Their suitability moves toward financial resilience metrics. The consultation actually has a scheduled date. It's February to March 2026. That is the near future. It covers risk warnings and client categorization. The UK recognized digital assets as property formally, and the consultation will integrate crypto into the mainstream regulation. That is the important part. However, there are a couple of downsides. The draft rejects crypto trading as a sophisticated investor qualification. So just because you've got experience trading crypto, you might have earned millions of dollars off doing it, millions of pounds, I should say, in this case, of doing it, doesn't mean that that's going to count towards you being a sophisticated investor. They've also highlighted poor outcomes from speculative trading. So they're still, at least from the FCA standpoint, trying to, or kind of keeping that risk category around Bitcoin and crypto assets. But there were a couple of claims that were made or misunderstandings that the tool has pulled out that people tend to make when they see headlines like this. The first one is that the consultation guarantees pro-crypto rules. That's not the case. Yeah, correctly, the tool's pulled out, this could actually tighten controls. So yes, a headline like this is really good, but it could go the other way. That consultation could be negative. We don't know exactly who's going to be involved in that committee. From a Bitcoin standpoint, what if the people they engage are very anti-Bitcoin and very pro meme coins, for instance? It could go completely the other way. So, David, where do you think this is going to rank? I'm going to give you 3 choices: negative, positive, or very positive.
I'm going to say positive, and I'm actually going to attempt to score here. I'm going to say it's a 2, a 1 or a 2, just because I think the timing is key, right? The consultation window is around kind of influencing regulation. It's not actually deciding on regulation, right? So as you said, it could go either way. So I'm more leaning towards the 1.
So slightly out again. It's actually more, it's still more bullish than you think, because the FCA has historically kept them at arm's length. It has really tried to distance itself from the crypto industry. So just the fact that they're actually saying, hey, we want to find the people that know the most about the industry, that are the experts, and bring them in and engage with them fully, is a real big positive. Now, the narrative is still strong. The narrative is the idea that the UK is embracing crypto as a full collaborator. The downside, though, is obviously, as I said, the tool is correctly picked up. We don't know what's going to happen. The industry recommendations could be ignored. They could result in stricter suitability rules, and small firms may face compliance burdens. It might actually make things harder for the small players. It may be focused on the big players. And to be fair, we do tend to see that after, look at the Trump administration. The entities that they've been engaging with are all the big players. I haven't heard word of the small players, or those sort of quote mum and pop shop crypto players, like the real startups, being engaged in those talks. So it is skewed, but either way, it signals institutional maturity and will be relevant over the next 1 to 3 years. So I would genuinely watch this piece of news.
Well, considering that this is the FCA, the major regulatory body that actually is seeking input, and it's basically what it sends a message to the market is that crypto is not just speculative as an asset class, but it's maturing and it's going to be taken seriously by the regulators.
Absolutely. And I think the key thing you hit on the key thing there, David, is key thing to watch here. Just out of all these points, you can see them on the screen, but at the bottom one, I want to draw your attention to: how are other European regulatory firms going to react? Yeah, how are the FCA equivalents in France, Germany, Italy, Spain going to react to this news? Are they going to start doing the same? So let's wait and see. But that is not the best news that's come out of the UK this week. The UK has actually passed the Property Act of 2025. So this act basically grants digital assets, including Bitcoin, formal recognition as a distinct third category of property, giving them explicit legal protection and clearer treatment in courts, insolvency, and ownership disputes. So historically, the law in this country has recognized 2 categories of property: things in possession, such as gold, cars, mobile phones, etc., and things in action, which are legal rights, for example, debts and shares. So they've actually developed a completely unique third category. They've not tried to lump it in with category 2, things in action, which I think is remarkable. But that's what the narrative said. So the good news is that the manipulation level is pretty much, I put low to neutral here because that's what the tool turned out, but the tool actually pointed out it was actually extremely low. The narrative obviously presents the UK as a modern, forward-leaning and structurally integrating Bitcoin into its legal framework, and obviously other digital assets. It evokes feelings of like confidence, legitimacy, optimism, and it uses a historical framing, specifically in this article, as the largest change since the Middle Ages. Now, I do find it funny when certain news agencies put out comments like that, because you can really tell which ones the government wants you to be behind, wants you to get behind, and which ones they don't. When you hear framing like that in a pro-government way, it's almost certain that the government has sort of put the release out themselves at some point. So yeah, it's although there are certain things that are there to make you think something, think a very pro stance, the fact is there's actually very little manipulation, and it's very fact-based. The law has been passed, it has been enacted, it's institutionally aligned, and it directly modifies the legal rights. It confirms that digital assets are formally become that third legally recognized type of property class that I mentioned. It is a change in the law, not a proposal. It passed, and here's a great thing, and I think this is so rare, especially for bills of this nature. It passed without amendments, which means it's got pretty much bipartisan support. So it gives you explicit enforceable rights over Bitcoin and stable coins, and obviously other types of assets. And that is in regards to treatment in terms of theft, fraud cases, estate planning, insolvency, and it builds on UK court precedent over the past couple of years. The UK has been going in this direction, even though it hasn't necessarily seemed that positive. This is a really breakthrough moment for the UK. It massively increases institutional readiness. Firms, not just in the UK, but across the world, I think will be looking at this and thinking, wow, the UK, which has been for hundreds of years the home of the financial system, obviously in the City of London, has now classified under its legal structure with bipartisan support. The crypto deserves the same safeties and protections as other forms of property, and we've given it its own classification. So, David, given that you gave the last story a 1, it turned out to be a 3.
Yeah.
What do you think this one's going to land at?
I think
just
this is really
effective. The highest ranking story we've had so far is the BlackRock IBIT ETF being their most profitable ETF, and that scored a 7.5.
Wow. Well, I'm gonna rank this a 5 or a 6, just because this is huge, at least for the UK, because traditionally, kind of property has been categorized in two areas. Either things in possession, so these are physical goods, or things in action, so such as legal rights, debts, and shares. Now, this is a completely new category where crypto didn't fit into these two categories, right? So they created a third category specifically for digital or electronic things, right? So this is huge. So things like NFTs, stable coins, Bitcoin, other tokens, it kind of paves the way for this new asset class.
Really.
So I'm quite bullish about this. Let's lock
it in. Let's lock it in.
Okay.
I'm happy to say you're actually on the ball. This is the first time you've actually guessed correctly. So
there you go.
So as we said, the UK formally, as David kind of just alluded to, but the UK formally recognizing digital assets as a third category of property is a major legal milestone, because it gives courts clear authority to treat Bitcoin like an asset that can be protected, recovered, inherited, seized, or disputed. And that gives it the same properties as other forms of traditional financial or physical property. This doesn't cause people to buy Bitcoin immediately. No, of course not. And it doesn't create any new liquidity like bank integrations do, but it dramatically strengthens the legal infrastructure around digital assets. Now, who does that matter for? Answer: institutions. Banks, exchanges, insurers, and custody providers now have a clear framework to operate in. It also reduces legal uncertainty during bankruptcies, theft cases, or insolvencies, making the UK a more attractive jurisdiction for Bitcoin companies. Something I thought I would never say, to be honest, with the way that the country has been going. So I'm really, really happy with it. In simple terms, I would just think about it like this. This law doesn't create adoption, but it removes a major barrier to long-term institutional participation and tells the world the UK considers Bitcoin a legitimate form of property worth protecting. So yeah, This actually fits in at the moment, I believe, as our second or third highest scoring story. So a really big piece of information, really big deal. And obviously, if you are interested in watching this story, this is one that we will be tracking for, I foresee, quite a long time. It is a really meaningful piece of news.
You know, Dom, another reason why I think this is incredibly bullish for Bitcoiners is that a big argument for investors about why they're not interested in Bitcoin or crypto is because it's not tangible, it's not physical, right?
That's right.
A lot of property investors say, you know what, I'd much prefer something I can touch, bricks and mortar, than digital assets. But what this does is it actually brings digital into the tangible world and it creates protection around digital assets. Yeah.
And I think just having the government sign off, like I know a lot of people who work in the City of London, actually a lot of people who work in the big banks in the City of London, and they still talk about Bitcoin and crypto in what I would call legacy speak. They're terrified to touch it. But being able to turn to them and say, well, actually, you know, the FCA is the FCA is behind it. The FCA is conducting is actually consulting members of the crypto community and experts of the crypto community, and they're now sculpting their legislation around it. And then also being able to say, and also, did you know it's now got the same property rights as anything else that you own? I think we'll start to convince some of those people in the TradFi world to actually start to investigate it and research it more deeply.
I think you're exactly right, Dom. And additionally, you know how many tens of IFAs, independent financial advisors here in the UK that I've spoken to and just asked their opinion about crypto and Bitcoin specifically. And they said it is not regulated. It's not actually supported by or protected under the FCA. And the government is close to banning it. That's the opinion and sentiment amongst very well-educated, experienced financial advisors. So this is actually, yeah, quite strong to support the regulatory framework and the protection of crypto.
Absolutely. And on that, that's all we've got for today, guys. And I think the key reason that we wanted to bring you these stories was because obviously there's been a lot of FUD, as David just alluded to, going around the UK, specifically around the moves that the government is making and whether they're going to sell their Bitcoin holdings, the 61,000 Bitcoin they have, whether they're going to ban political donations or whether they're just going to go for an outright ban in China, full China style. But what this proves is that the reality is actually kind of the opposite. And unless you're actually getting up to speed with these things, you're going to completely miss it, because don't forget, most will miss it, most will mock it, and most will wait until it's too late. But the 1%, they're with conviction.
Be a 1%er.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.